This episode is sponsored by Squarespace. Whether you need a domain, website, or online store, make your next move with Squarespace. So I'm on the island of Skiathos in the Mediterranean, and I'm here for a family wedding, and only for a few days, so most of the time is taken up with meeting up with family and catching up. But I am grabbing little spaces in between just to go out in the streets and do a little bit of photography where I can. And recently I was sent the new Ricoh GR IV, so I thought I would make a super quick video just running you through my very early experiences with this camera. I've only been using it for about a week now, just testing it out. As usual, this is not a review. You know I don't do kind of techie reviews on this channel, but seeing as I'm someone who's known for using this camera quite a bit, I thought I'd talk to you about what they've done in this camera and why this may or may not be the right camera for me going forward. Before I do that, I probably need to start by being very honest with you and saying that I actually haven't used my old GR cameras for about a year now, because my Ricoh GR3 and GR3X, which is the camera I really loved, both of them broke, and they broke for exactly the same reason. The little scroll wheel that used to be on the back here actually wouldn't scroll anymore. I kind of scrolled it and sometimes it would go forwards or backwards, and it was so frustrating for two reasons. One, because that's the scroll wheel you use to review the images that you've taken in a day, and two, it's how I used to change my ISO. So thumb and forefinger were shutter speed and aperture, and that dial at the back was my ISO. And I like having those three things that I can reach easily because I shoot in manual mode. But because that dial broke, both those cameras are now kind of bricks that just sit on my shelf and I don't really use them anymore. So I was really happy to see when they made the new version, the GR4, that the scroll wheel is actually no longer there, because it was obviously breaking so often, and I knew other people who had GRs that had the same issue that I did. And they've replaced it and gone back to the rocker switch that they actually had on the Ricoh GR2. So I can now change my ISO up and down on this finger, and then my aperture and shutter speed are thumb and forefinger on the back here. So I'm back to being able to shoot fully manual and being able to reach all my settings really easily. Another issue that a lot of people had with the GR cameras was that when the lens used to extend when you turn the camera on, no problem, but when you switched it off, it would retract back into the camera, and sometimes it would suck dust back in with it onto the sensor. And obviously, this is not a camera you can just open yourself and clean the sensor, which meant that you have to take it away and send it off so that it can be taken apart to actually clean that sensor, which was obviously a big issue. Apparently, what they've done on this is they've vastly improved the seal around that lens so that now dust can't make its way as easily from that lens when it retracts onto the sensor itself. So that's another nice improvement. Another improvement they've made on the camera is that the battery is now a new battery. It's actually bigger than the old one and lasts a bit longer. I've heard it's not a massive jump. I certainly haven't noticed it myself, but it will sort of last for more shots in a day. The reason I don't really notice that with this is that I always have the camera off if I'm not shooting. And one of the beauties of the GR cameras is that they fire up so quickly. I mean, it's ready to go in less than a second to take a shot. So usually if I'm walking around, the camera stays off in my hand the whole time. And if I'm walking around and see something, I find that I can turn the camera on and lift it. And by the time I've got the composition ready, the camera's ready to go before I am. So because I shoot that way and only turn the camera on when I'm about to take a shot, batteries, even the old ones, used to last me a week or so before I needed to recharge. It just depends how you shoot. But for those of you who like to walk around and keep the camera on because you feel more ready, then yes, the battery is slightly improved. Something else they've added to the new GR is that you now have an internal ND, which you can set to off or on, or you can let the camera decide when it should be used and put it on auto. Personally, I'm not sure whether I'd ever use an ND on a camera like this. The only time I use NDs on any of my other cameras is if I want, say, to have my lens wide open to have a very shallow depth of field, but the light outside is very bright. So I know that I need another way to be able to dial the light down. That's where an ND filter comes in really handy. But with this, I'm not really sure when I'd use an ND filter. I mean, I'm shooting with a 28mm equivalent lens on an APS-C sensor, and the widest aperture I can go is 2.8. on this camera, which means I'm never shooting for a shallow depth of field anyway. I guess where it might come in handy is if you actually want to, say, lengthen your shutter speed or get some kind of motion blur going with a slow shutter, then you could push the ND and get even slow shutter speeds with the ambient light that's available. So maybe it'll be helpful to some photographers, but personally I doubt I'd ever use that particular function on this new camera. They've also vastly improved the image stabilization in the new camera, which is nice to be able to hand hold things, especially when the light's getting low and maybe you want to have a slower shutter speed. You can now hand hold at much slower shutter speeds. And the other nice thing about having that image stabilization is because this is only maximum aperture 2.8, it means you start to get limited options when the light gets lower. But the low light should be better now because we can slow that shutter speed down, and the image stabilization should give us a bit more of a buffer to be able to shoot in slightly lower light and still get cleaner pictures without having to boost our ISO up. On my walk home from dinner last night, I quickly stopped by the harbour just to do a little test to see how slow I could have the shutter speed with this new image stabilization and still get a reasonably clean shot. This first image I shot at ISO 400, f2.8 and 0.3 of a second. And looking at the details of the shot, it looks pretty sharp and pretty clean to me, so it did really well there. I decided to step it up and I took it to still ISO 400 and then f3.5 and 0.6 of a second. And the image is still very, very clean. Remember, this is all handheld. Then I pushed it a bit further to ISO 400 at f4.5 at 1 full second. And it's starting to get a little bit of shake in it, but it's still pretty sharp and certainly very usable. Remember, this is ISO 400 in the middle of the night at f4.5 on an APS-C sensor, so it's pretty impressive. I decided to see how far I could push it, so I went to ISO 400, f5.6, that's crazy settings for the middle of the night, at 1.6 of a second handheld, and it still looks good to me. It still looks pretty sharp. Yes, if you really pixel peep, you can see it's getting a bit soft, but I'm getting away with it, and you can start to see that you're getting some nice movement in the water as well. Just to see how far I could go, I went to ISO 400, f5.6 at 2 full seconds now, hand holding, and it's still usable. Yes, you can see some ghosting now, but you're getting nice movement in the water. And honestly, if I just brace myself a little bit more, I might be able to get even this shot with these settings really sharp in the background as well. Then just to find the absolute limit, I went to ISO 400, f8 at 3 full seconds in the middle of the night, right? Which is just crazy settings for nighttime photography. And yes, in the back, you can see a lot of ghosting now, but you can see nice movement in the water. And I was so impressed that I could even get this far. If I just braced myself against a tree at this point or something, or held my hands against a rock wall, I could get this working absolutely fine, even in the middle of the night on an APS-C sensor. So the image stabilization is definitely improved and pretty impressive now. Other little improvements to the camera are that apparently it's a brand new lens in here, which is sharper corner to corner. But I'll be honest and say that the Ricoh GR3 and GR3X I found were super sharp images, some of the sharpest I've had. So if there are actually any differences in this, I think it's probably only going to be marginal. The old images were plenty good for me. And I have done a little bit of shooting. I can't really see on my phone. I'm only editing on my phone, and I can't really see on the back of the camera any difference yet, but maybe when I pull them up on a big screen, I'll be able to see it. I'm imagining it's only going to be slight incremental changes though. Then the other thing is that now they've slightly improved the resolution, but only slightly. The old cameras were 24 megapixels. This now is 26. Is that enough for you to upgrade? It wouldn't be enough for me to upgrade personally. I mean, that's just a very marginal resolution change. I would have liked, like a lot of you I'm sure, for them to really dare to go to something like 40 megapixels if they could push it, because that starts to give us more options to use the crop mode in the camera without getting rough resolutions when you start going down to the 35mm option or the 50mm option. It'd be great to have more resolution to play with those crop modes. Personally, the resolution, that slight increase, is not really a selling point for me. Another thing they've done with this new model is that they've included internal memory in the camera. So you don't actually need to use an SD card for this camera if you don't want to. You can just shoot straight onto the internal memory. I think it's 53 gigs. And some people will appreciate that because strangely, and it's probably a space issue, now the card no longer takes an SD card. It actually takes, see, I can't even get it out. They're so annoying, these little things. They actually take micro SDs, like you sort of get in drones and GoPros and stuff. So having that in there, I mean, I don't have a lot of these lying around, and they are really kind of fiddly to use. Then Ricoh have said that this is now a smaller camera than it was. if you side by side the old camera with this camera, yes, technically it is smaller, but it's so minuscule, the difference, it really doesn't matter. I mean, it's slightly thinner now, and it's slightly shorter in terms of its, top to bottom size. But for me, these cameras were always small. And the big deal with this camera was that it was actually pocketable. It doesn't say it's a pocket camera, but you can't fit it in a pair of jeans. This you always could, and now you can, just slightly easier. So that was good. Something I think some people will have issues with, and I don't blame you to be honest, is the price now. The price of this, I've just looked it up online. In the States, I think it's coming in at almost $1,500. It's a lot of money to spend for a camera like this that really is something that just does one job very, very well. If you've got the money to get one, yes, this is a camera that a lot of street photographers love and go to, but for me, it's a huge investment. And when I was starting out in photography, I'm not sure I could justify this because these were never my only camera. I'd have to have lots of other cameras to do things like filmmaking or portrait photography. And this was always like the second or third camera that would sit in my camera bag. And to spend that much money on it, yeah, I mean, that is a lot of money. So you definitely have to think about it in terms of the price and what you could maybe get with other brands. But it is a fantastic bit of kit. And those people who love this camera will always love it and will always pay the money for it because it's worth it. And that's a good point to make, actually. These cameras are not for everybody. And I've said that in every video where I mention these cameras. And it should be pretty obvious by now, by the way, that Ricoh don't know I'm making this video and they haven't given me any money to say nice things about them. I'm going to be honest with you. But I like the fact that Ricoh are also honest with you in their marketing. And I've heard them give talks and presentations where they talk about these. And they say that lots of other cameras out there are trying to be Swiss Army knives, to do a little bit of everything. They want you to be able to take portraits with it and street with it and to filmmate with it and to do everything, right? Ricoh have been pretty honest from the start that this is not a Swiss Army knife. This is like that one paring knife you have in your drawer that does only one job, but it does it super well. And that's why I say think about it in terms of the price and do you need this? Do you need it to do that one thing? And I'll be very honest and say that these cameras for me right now, I've moved a little bit away of shooting this way. This 28mm field of view, I now find too wide for me. I'm shooting more 35 down to 50 these days, in which case this might not be right. You can't zoom with it. It is just 28mm. Everything's going to be in focus. You're going to be shooting scenes more than you're shooting subjects. That's what this camera does brilliantly. Personally, I'd probably hold out for the Ricoh GR IV, the 40mm one, because I find that's far more the way that I see. But if you're a photographer who shoots on the street and you love that classic 28mm approach and you want something that's genuinely pocketable that you can have with you all the time, whenever you walk around on any given day, it's always in your bag or in your pocket, this is probably the best option out there for you. So I guess my little summary, having used this camera for only a few days now, I would say that it's exactly the same as what you know. And if you love the previous GR3, you'll love this as much. And yes, it has some slight improvements that will help you with what you do. But basically under the hood, it will still feel like the same camera that you know with those slight improvements and those kind of quality of life things that should mean the camera lasts longer and the images that come out of them should be slightly better. Just before I show you some of the test images I've been taking while I've been walking around on Skiathos, I want to say thank you to Squarespace who've sponsored this video. If you need a new website or a domain, they're a fantastic option. I've used them myself as my website of choice for over a decade now. One of the things I love about Squarespace is I always wanted a very minimalist looking website, so that it was my images that stood out, not some crazy design around them. And Squarespace have a whole host of templates put together by professional designers that have that very clean and minimalist look. You just select the template you like the look of, and it's so easy to build in the back end. You're just dragging things in and you can see what you're building. So you drag in your text blocks, your image blocks, your galleries, you can embed videos, you can put in contact pages and even build yourself a store. It couldn't be simpler. Start your free trial today at squarespace.com and go to squarespace.com/Sean Tucker to get 10% off your first purchase.